Have you ever wondered if the miracles in the Bible were real? What if I told you they were, but not in the way you think? My name is Marcus Webb, and I'm a simple truck driver from Nevada. 3 months ago, during the worst storm our town had ever seen, I found something in my barn that changed everything I thought I knew about faith, history, and the universe itself. The being I sheltered that night told me secrets that have been hidden for thousands of years. Secrets about Moses, the Red Sea, and technology so advanced it looked like magic to ancient people. What I'm about to share with you will challenge everything you believe. But I swear on my life, every word of this is true. If this is helping, hit subscribe. I share stories like this every week. My life in Copper Ridge, Nevada was about as ordinary as it gets. I'm 42 years old, been driving trucks for 20 years, hauling supplies across the desert between Las Vegas and Salt Lake City. The pay's decent, the work is steady, and honestly, I never asked for much more than that. I lived alone in a small ranch-style house on the edge of town, about 5 miles from anywhere you'd call civilization. My nearest neighbor, old Dale Patterson, lived a good 2 miles down the dusty road. Most people thought I was crazy for living so far out, but I liked the quiet. After spending days in a rumbling truck cab, listening to the engine roar and the radio crackle, coming home to silence felt like heaven. My property wasn't much to look at. Just 3 acres of dry land, some scraggly Joshua trees, and a barn that was older than I was. My grandfather built that barn back in 1967, and it was showing its age. The red paint had faded to a dusty pink, several boards were loose, and the roof leaked in 2 places I'd been meaning to fix for about 3 years. But it served its purpose. I kept my tools in there, some old furniture I couldn't bear to throw away, and my late father's collection of National Geographic magazines dating back to 1982. People in Copper Ridge knew me as a quiet guy who kept to himself. I'd stop by Millie's Diner every Tuesday for meatloaf, wave to folks at the gas station, and maybe grab a beer at Connor's Tavern on Friday nights. That was about the extent of my social life, and I was fine with that. My faith was simple too. My mother, Dorothy Webb, raised me Baptist. We went to church every Sunday when I was a kid, said grace before meals, and kept a Bible on the coffee table. After she passed 5 years ago, I'll admit my attendance got spotty. I still believed in God, still prayed sometimes when I was alone on long drives, but I wasn't what you'd call devout. The Bible stories, Noah's Ark, Jonah and the whale, Moses parting the Red Sea. I believed they happened, but I never spent much time thinking about the details. They were just stories from long ago, lessons about faith and obedience. My Tuesday and Thursday mornings usually started the same way. I'd wake up at 5, make a pot of strong black coffee, and sit on my back porch watching the sun come up over the mountains. There's something about desert sunrises that makes you feel small in a good way. All those colors spreading across the sky, pink and orange and gold, like God himself was painting just for you. After coffee, I'd check my phone for my route schedule, pack my lunch, usually a couple sandwiches and an apple, and head out to the depot by 7. My truck, a 2018 Peterbilt with 340,000 miles on it, waited for me in spot number 7. I knew every rattle, every squeak, every way she pulled slightly left when you hit 55. The runs were predictable. Monday through Friday, I'd haul construction materials, electronics, sometimes refrigerated goods. I'd seen every mile of highway between here and Salt Lake probably 1,000 times. I could tell you where the speed traps were, which rest stops had the cleanest bathrooms, and exactly where you lose radio signal for 37 miles. Evenings were quiet. I'd heat up something simple for dinner, pasta, maybe a frozen pizza, sometimes just scrambled eggs. I'd watch whatever game was on TV or flip through my dad's old magazines. By 9 o'clock, I was usually in bed, reading for 20 minutes before my eyes got heavy. It was a simple life, maybe even boring by some standards. But it was mine, and I was content. I didn't need excitement or adventure. I'd seen enough of the country through my windshield to know that most places were pretty much the same. Just people trying to get by, working their jobs, raising their families, believing in something bigger than themselves. The week before everything changed started like any other. Monday, I hauled lumber to a construction site outside Henderson. Tuesday was a rest day, so I did laundry and fixed the leaky faucet in my bathroom that had been dripping for a month. Wednesday and Thursday, I transported computer equipment to a new office building in St. George. Friday, I was scheduled for a lighter load, just some boxed goods to a warehouse in Mesquite. The only unusual thing that week was the weather reports. Every channel kept talking about a massive storm system moving in from the Pacific. Biggest storm in 15 years, the weatherman on Channel 4 kept saying, pointing at his colorful maps with their swirling clouds. We're looking at possible flash floods, power outages, and wind gusts, up to 70 miles per hour. Residents in rural areas should prepare for the worst. I wasn't too worried. I'd been through desert storms before. They blow in fast, dump some rain, kick up dust, and move on. I made sure I had batteries for my flashlight, filled up some water jugs, and brought in the lawn chairs from my porch so they wouldn't blow away. That was the extent of my preparation. Saturday morning, October 14th, I woke up to an eerie stillness. The air felt heavy, pressing down on everything. The sky had turned a strange, greenish-gray color I'd never seen before. Not a single bird was singing. Even the usual desert wind had died completely, like the whole world was holding its breath. I stood on my porch with my coffee, staring at that weird sky, and felt something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't fear exactly, more like anticipation, like standing at the top of a roller coaster right before the drop. Something was coming. Something big, and every instinct I had was telling me to pay attention. By noon, the first clouds started rolling in, massive, dark things that looked more like mountains than clouds. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in an hour. I brought my truck into town and parked it at the depot, figuring it'd be safer there than at my place. Then I drove my old Ford pickup back home, stocked up the barn with anything that might blow away, and settled in to wait. I had no idea that in less than 12 hours, everything I thought I knew about the universe, about history, about God himself, was about to be turned completely upside down. I was just Marcus Webb, truck driver, preparing for a storm. If I'd known what was really coming, I don't know if I would have done anything different. Maybe I would have run. Maybe I would have locked every door and hidden in my basement, but probably not. Because deep down, in a place I didn't even know existed, I think I'd been waiting my whole life for something extraordinary to happen. And that night, it finally did. Subscribe, because part 2 gets even crazier. The storm hit at exactly 8:47 p.m. I know because I was watching the clock on my microwave, waiting for my frozen dinner to finish heating, when the power went out. 1 second the house was humming with electricity, the next it was dead silent and pitch black. Then the wind started. If I'd known what was really coming, I don't know if I would have done anything different. Maybe I would have run. Maybe I would have locked every door and hidden in my basement, but probably not. Because deep down, in a place I didn't even know existed, I think I'd been waiting my whole life for something extraordinary to happen. And that night, it finally did. Subscribe, because part 2 gets even crazier. The storm hit at exactly 8:47 p.m. I know because I was watching the clock on my microwave, waiting for my frozen dinner to finish heating, when the power went out. 1 second the house was humming with electricity, the next it was dead silent and pitch black. Then the wind started. I've been through hurricanes when I drove routes down south, and I've seen tornadoes touch down in Oklahoma. But this wind was different. It didn't howl or whistle. It roared like a freight train was parked right outside my window. The whole house shook. Pictures fell off the walls. My kitchen window cracked straight down the middle with a sound like a gunshot. I grabbed my flashlight and moved away from the windows, heading to the hallway where I'd be safer. Rain hammered the roof so hard it sounded like someone was dumping buckets of gravel on it. Lightning flashed every few seconds, turning everything bright white, then plunging it back into darkness. The thunder didn't rumble. It exploded, so loud I felt it in my chest. This wasn't a normal storm. The weatherman had been wrong. This was something else entirely. I crouched in my hallway for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. The house creaked and groaned around me. I heard something crash outside. Maybe my mailbox or the old satellite dish on the roof. The wind kept getting stronger, impossibly strong, and I started genuinely wondering if my house would hold together. Then, through all the noise, I heard something different, a sound that didn't belong. It was high-pitched, almost like a whistle, but mechanical. It rose and fell in a pattern that cut through the storm noise. And it was getting closer. I crawled to my living room window and peeked through the curtains. Lightning flashed, and for just a second, I saw something in the sky. Something big and dark, spinning out of control, trailing what looked like smoke or steam. It wasn't an airplane. The shape was all wrong, almost circular, with lights flickering along its edges. Another lightning flash. The object was lower now, maybe 100 feet up, tumbling through the storm like a leaf in a hurricane. The whistling sound got louder, more desperate. Then it disappeared behind my barn. A massive crash shook the ground. My windows rattled. The whistling cut off suddenly, replaced by a strange humming sound that made my teeth ache. I sat there frozen, my heart hammering. What the hell was that, a plane, some kind of military aircraft? Whatever it was, it had just crashed on my property. And despite every survival instinct telling me to stay inside, I knew I had to go check if someone needed help. I put on my raincoat and boots, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped out into the storm. The wind nearly knocked me over immediately. Rain hit my face like needles. I had to lean forward at a 45-degree angle just to make progress toward the barn. The humming got louder as I approached. Through the rain, I could see a weird blue glow coming from behind the barn, pulsing like a heartbeat. The air smelled strange, sharp and metallic, like burning copper mixed with ozone. I rounded the corner of the barn and stopped dead. There, half buried in the ground, was something that definitely wasn't a plane. It was roughly circular, maybe 30 feet across, made of some kind of metal that seemed to shift colors in the lightning flashes. Silver, then blue, then almost purple. The surface was smooth except for strange symbols or patterns that ran along its edge, glowing faintly. Parts of it were crumpled and sparking, clearly damaged from the crash. But what made me forget how to breathe was the figure lying in the mud about 10 feet from the craft. At first, I thought it was a person in some kind of suit, but as I got closer, shining my flashlight on it, I realized it wasn't a suit. That was its skin. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, and thin, with long limbs that looked almost fragile. Its skin was smooth and grayish-blue, and it was wearing something that looked like fabric but shimmered like liquid metal. Its head turned toward my light, and I saw its face. Large eyes, way larger than human eyes, dark and reflective like black glass. No nose, just 2 small slits. A small mouth. The face was angular and delicate, almost beautiful in a way that made no sense. We stared at each other for maybe 5 seconds, though it felt like an hour. Then it tried to move and collapsed, making a sound that was definitely pain. High and musical, but unmistakably a cry for help. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to run back to the house, lock the doors, call 911, call the military, call someone, but I couldn't move. This being, this impossible thing that shouldn't exist, was hurt and scared and looking at me like I was its only hope. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating everything in harsh white light. I saw a deep gash on the being's leg, leaking something that wasn't quite blood. It was thicker, more silver than red, and it glowed faintly in the darkness. It raised one long hand toward me, not threatening, pleading. Its mouth moved, and sounds came out that my brain couldn't process at first, like multiple tones layered over each other. But then, somehow, I understood. Maybe I heard actual words, maybe I just felt the meaning, but I knew what it was asking. Help me. I made a decision that would change my life forever. I dropped to my knees beside this alien being, put my arm under its shoulders, which felt strange, lighter than they should be, and said, Okay, I've got you. Let's get you inside. It took every ounce of strength I had to help it stand. It was tall, but surprisingly light, like its bones were hollow. We stumbled together through the storm toward my barn. The wind tried to tear us apart. Rain poured over us. Behind me, the crashed craft sparked and hummed, its lights slowly dimming. I kicked open the barn door and half-carried, half-dragged the being inside. We collapsed together on the dusty floor, both of us breathing hard, though its breathing sounded like wind chimes. I had just sheltered an alien from another world, and my simple, ordinary life was over. The storm raged outside, but in that quiet barn, surrounded by my grandfather's old tools and my father's magazines, I sat next to an impossible creature and waited for what would happen next. Neither of us could have known that this moment, this simple act of kindness during a storm, would lead to revelations that would shake the foundations of human faith itself. I sat there in the barn for maybe 10 minutes, just staring at the being slumped against my grandfather's old workbench, trying to convince myself this was real. The flashlight beam shook in my hand. My wet clothes stuck to my skin. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the barn, everything felt suspended, like time had stopped working properly. The alien's breathing had steadied a bit, though it still sounded like nothing I'd ever heard. Musical almost, with harmonics that shouldn't come from a living throat. Its large black eyes watched me, unblinking, and I couldn't tell if it was afraid or just studying me the way I was studying it. "This isn't happening," I whispered to myself. "This is a dream. I fell asleep during the storm, and this is just a really weird dream." I pinched my arm, hard. It hurt. The alien tilted its head slightly, like it was curious about what I was doing. "Okay, not a dream," my voice cracked. "You're real. You're actually real. There's an alien in my barn. There's a crashed spaceship behind my barn. This is insane. This is completely insane." I stood up suddenly, pacing back and forth, my mind racing in circles. What was I supposed to do? Call 911? "Hi, emergency services? Yeah, I've got an alien bleeding silver stuff in my barn. Could you send an ambulance? Or maybe the Air Force. Do you have a department for this?" They'd think I was drunk or crazy. Or worse, they'd believe me, and then what? The government would show up. Military. Scientists. They'd take this being away, probably lock it up somewhere, study it like a lab rat. And me? I'd probably end up in a government facility myself, answering questions for the rest of my life. "I can't do this," I said, still pacing. "I'm just a truck driver. I deliver lumber and computer parts. I don't know anything about aliens or spaceships or whatever this is. I should call someone who knows about these things." "But who do you call when you find an alien?" "There's no hotline for this, no customer service number, no instruction manual." The being made a sound, soft, gentle, like wind through leaves. I turned to look at it, and it was watching me with what I could only describe as patience. Despite everything, despite being injured and stranded on an alien world, it looked calm. That somehow made me feel worse about my panic. "I'm sorry," I said, running my hands through my wet hair. "I'm sorry, this is a lot. You probably don't even understand what I'm saying." It shifted slightly, and I noticed the wound on its leg was still seeping that glowing silver fluid. Right, it was hurt. Whatever else was happening, there was an injured living being in front of me, and I was standing around having an existential crisis. I grabbed an old blanket from a shelf and approached slowly. "I'm going to help with your leg, okay? This might hurt." The alien watched me but didn't resist as I gently pressed the blanket against the wound. The fabric immediately soaked through with that strange silver substance. Up close, I could see the injury wasn't like a cut on human skin. It was more like the surface had fractured, like broken glass. "I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted quietly. "I don't know if this even helps you. Human medicine probably doesn't work on aliens. You might need different air, or different pressure, or... God, I don't know. But its breathing seemed easier with the pressure on the wound, so maybe I was doing something right." My mind kept spinning with questions and fears. What if it was dangerous? What if it had diseases I couldn't fight? What if there were more of them coming? What if its ship exploding had released radiation and I was already dying? I looked at its face again, those huge dark eyes reflecting my flashlight beam. There was intelligence there, I could feel it. This wasn't some mindless creature, this was a person, just a person from somewhere else. "Are there more of you?" I asked, not expecting an answer. "Did you come alone? Is someone looking for you?" The being's hand moved, reaching toward its chest where that liquid metal fabric covered it. Long fingers, 6 of them, I noticed, touched something there, and a soft glow appeared under its palm. For a second, Symbols flickered in the air between us, shapes and patterns that hurt to look at because my brain couldn't make sense of them. Then the glow faded, and the being slumped back, clearly exhausted from the effort. "Okay, don't do that," I said quickly. "Just rest. Save your energy." But I'd seen something in those symbols, felt something. Loneliness. It was alone. Whatever had happened, it was as lost and scared as I was. That thought steadied me somehow. We were both in over our heads, both dealing with something completely outside our experience. At least I was on my home planet. This being was millions of miles from anything familiar, injured with no way home. "All right," I said, taking a deep breath. "All right, here's what we're going to do. We're not calling anyone. Not yet. Not until I figure out what's happening and what you need. But I'm going to help you, okay? I don't know how, but I'm going to try." The storm outside seemed to be easing up a bit. The wind wasn't shaking the barn as violently anymore. I looked around at my surroundings. Old tools, dusty furniture, boxes of junk. Not exactly a medical facility. "I need to get some supplies from the house," I told the being. "Water, bandages, maybe some food, though I have no idea what you eat. Can you stay here? Will you be okay if I leave for a few minutes?" Those dark eyes blinked slowly, the first time I'd seen it blink. It was somehow reassuring, that small familiar gesture, even from such an unfamiliar face. I stood up, still holding the blanket against its wound. "Keep pressure on this, okay? Like this." I moved its own hand to hold the blanket. The silver fluid had slowed but hadn't stopped. "I'll be right back, I promise." 5 minutes, maybe 10. At the barn door, I paused and looked back. The alien sat there in the dim glow of my flashlight, looking impossibly fragile and impossibly strange all at once. Part of me still wanted to run, to pretend this wasn't happening, to go back to my simple life of highways and frozen dinners. But I'd made my choice when I helped it out of the storm. There was no going back now. "Don't die while I'm gone," I said, trying for humor, but it came out sounding desperate. "Please don't die." Then I stepped back into the rain, which had lessened to a steady drizzle, and ran toward my house. My mind was already racing ahead. What supplies did I have that might help? How could I keep this secret? How long before someone noticed the crashed ship? And underneath all those practical questions was a deeper one that I couldn't shake. Why me? Of all the places in all the world this being could have crashed, why my barn? Why my property? What were the odds? I didn't believe in coincidences. My mother had always said everything happened for a reason, part of God's plan. But if this was God's plan, I couldn't begin to imagine what that plan was. I just knew that, for better or worse, my life had changed completely. The man who went into that barn was Marcus Webb, truck driver, nobody special. The man who came out was someone else entirely. Someone carrying an impossible secret that would only get heavier in the days to come. I burst into my house, dripping rainwater everywhere, and stood in my dark kitchen trying to think clearly. The power was still out. I grabbed another flashlight from the drawer and started gathering supplies by its beam. First aid kit from under the bathroom sink, probably useless, but it was all I had. Clean towels from the linen closet, bottled water. I stared at my refrigerator, trying to decide what food might work. Fruit? Bread? For all I knew, this being breathed methane and ate rocks. I grabbed some apples and crackers anyway. As I moved through my house collecting things, the reality of what I was doing finally hit me with full force. I was actively hiding an extraterrestrial being from the authorities. That had to be illegal. That had to be treason or something. They probably had black site prisons for people who did this kind of thing. I stopped in my living room, arms full of supplies, breathing hard. My mother's Bible sat on the coffee table where it always was. I stared at it in the flashlight beam. What would she think of all this? She believed in angels, in miracles, in God's mysterious ways. But aliens? Beings from other planets? That wasn't in the Bible. Or was it? "In my Father's house are many mansions," Jesus had said. Could that mean other worlds? Other children of God scattered among the stars? My phone was on the coffee table, battery at 30%. I could still call. There was probably still time to step back from this, to let someone else handle it. I picked up the phone, thumb hovering over the screen. But I kept seeing those eyes, that expression of pain and fear and hope all mixed together. I'd looked into the eyes of a conscious, intelligent being from another world, and it had asked me for help. Not the government, not scientists, me. And I'd said yes. I'd made a promise out there in the storm, even if it wasn't in words. I'd said I would help. I put the phone down. My hands were shaking as I grabbed a backpack and started loading the supplies into it. This was crazy. This was the craziest thing I'd ever done. But somewhere between finding the crashed ship and carrying that being into my barn, I'd made a choice. I'd chosen compassion over fear, curiosity over safety. Maybe that made me stupid. Maybe that made me a criminal. But I couldn't unmake that choice, and honestly, I didn't want to. I was zipping up the backpack when I heard something that made my blood run cold. A distant sound, barely audible over the dying storm. A helicopter. I ran to my window and looked out. Far to the north, I could see lights in the sky moving in a search pattern. They were probably looking for the crash. Of course they were. Something that size falling from the sky would have shown up on radar, on satellite, on every tracking system the military had. How long before they searched my property? An hour? Less? I grabbed the backpack and ran back out into the drizzle, moving as fast as I could toward the barn. The crashed ship was still behind it, partially visible, its lights completely dark now. From the air, in the dark and rain, maybe they wouldn't spot it right away. But come morning, in daylight, there'd be no hiding it. I crashed through the barn door. We have a problem. There's a helicopter searching the area, and they're going to find your ship. They're going to find you. The alien looked up at me, and I swear I saw understanding in those dark eyes. It struggled to stand, using the workbench for support, clearly in pain. No, wait, don't. I dropped the backpack and moved to help it. You can't move. You're hurt. And even if you could, where would you go? They'll have thermal imaging, search teams, dogs probably. The being's hand touched my arm, and I felt it tingle like static electricity. Then, somehow, I understood what it was trying to communicate. Not words exactly, more like concepts flooding into my mind. Hidden. Must be hidden, not found. Not yet. Okay, I said, my mind racing. Okay, we hide you better. My basement, maybe? No, they'll search the house. My truck? No, too exposed. I looked around the barn frantically. Where can I hide someone in here? My eyes landed on the old root cellar door in the corner, half covered by boxes of my dad's magazines. My grandfather had built it back when people still worried about nuclear war. A small underground room, maybe 8 feet by 8 feet, accessed through a trap door. I'd barely been down there in years except to store some canned goods. There, I pointed. Underground. It's not much, but it's hidden. Can you make it? Together, we stumbled across the barn. I shoved the boxes aside and pulled open the trap door. A wooden ladder descended into darkness. The space smelled of earth and dust and old preserves. It's going to be dark and cold, I warned, but it's the safest place I've got. The alien looked down into the darkness, then back at me. Again, that tingle of communication, trust, gratitude. Getting down the ladder nearly killed us both. The being's injured leg could barely support weight, and those long limbs weren't designed for human-sized ladder rungs. But somehow we managed it, and I helped settle the alien onto some old blankets I kept down there. I climbed back up and grabbed the backpack of supplies, tossing it down. Food and water, though I don't know if you can eat any of it. Medical supplies, a flashlight. I'll come back as soon as I can, I promise. The being sat in the small pool of flashlight glow, looking up at me from the underground room. It seemed so vulnerable down there, so completely dependent on my help. But there was something else in its expression too, a kind of intensity, a purpose. Like it was trying to tell me something important. What? I asked. What is it? Its hand moved to that liquid metal fabric again, touching the spot on its chest. Symbols flickered again in the air, but this time they held longer. I saw shapes that might have been stars, patterns that could have been maps or diagrams. And something else. Something that looked almost like ancient writing, but not from any language I recognized. The symbols faded, and the being slumped back, exhausted. "Rest," I told it. "Save your strength. We'll figure this out, okay? Whatever you're trying to tell me, we'll figure it out. But first, we survived the night." I could hear the helicopter getting closer now. I needed to move. "I'm closing the door," I said. "Don't make any noise, no matter what you hear. I'm going to deal with whoever comes, and I'll come back for you. I swear it." Those dark eyes held mine for a long moment. Then the being nodded, an almost human gesture that somehow made me feel better. I closed the trapdoor and piled the boxes back over it, arranging them to look natural. Then I grabbed some tools and made a show of organizing the barn, trying to look busy, trying to look normal, trying to prepare for whatever was about to happen. Through the barn walls, I heard the helicopter passing overhead, searchlights sweeping across my property. I'd made my decision. I'd chosen to protect this being, to keep it secret, to help it however I could. There was no backing out now. Whatever came next, military interrogation, legal trouble, or something even worse, I'd face it. Because somehow, standing in that barn listening to search helicopters, I knew with absolute certainty that this moment mattered. That this being in my root cellar carried knowledge that was important, maybe world-changing. I didn't know what or why yet, but I felt it deep in my bones. My simple life was over. My comfortable routine was shattered. And despite the fear humming through my veins like electricity, part of me felt more alive than I had in years. I'd made my choice, now I just had to live with it. The helicopter passed over twice more that night, searchlight turning my property into daylight for 30-second intervals. Each time, I stood outside in plain view, playing the part of a concerned citizen checking his property after the storm. Once, I even waved at the helicopter. The best way to not look suspicious, I figured, was to be completely visible. By 2 in the morning, the search seemed to move further east. The rain had stopped completely. The sky was clearing, stars appearing between breaking clouds. I waited another hour to be safe, then finally went back to the barn. "It's me," I called softly before opening the trapdoor. "They're gone for now." The alien was exactly where I'd left it, sitting against the earthen wall, the flashlight still on but dimming. It looked up when I climbed down the ladder, and I was relieved to see it was alert. "How's your leg?" I asked, kneeling beside it. The being pulled back the blanket I'd left. The wound looked better. The fracture-like breaks in its skin had started to seal themselves somehow, the edges glowing faintly as they knit together. The silver fluid had stopped leaking entirely. "You heal fast," I said, impressed. "That's good, that's really good." I pulled out the water bottle and crackers from the backpack. "I don't know what you eat, but I brought these. Can you eat our food? Will it make you sick?" The alien reached out slowly and took a cracker, examining it closely. Those long fingers turned it over, and I noticed its skin wasn't smooth like I'd first thought. It had a very fine texture, almost like the grain of wood, but much more delicate. It brought the cracker close to where its nose should be, as if smelling it, though those slits didn't move. Then it took a small bite. I held my breath, half expecting it to choke or collapse, but it chewed slowly, swallowed, and took another small bite. Not exactly enthusiastic, but it was eating. "Okay, good." I let out my breath. "That's something at least." I sat down across from it in the cramped space, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had kept me going all night was wearing off. "I don't know what happens next," I admitted. "They're going to keep searching. Once it gets light, they'll find your ship for sure. I don't know how to hide something that big." The alien set down the cracker and touched that spot on its chest again. This time, when the symbols appeared, they were clearer, more stable. I saw what looked like a map with points of light, then images that shifted and changed. Buildings, people, historical scenes that flickered past too fast to fully process. "I don't understand," I said, frustrated. "I can feel that you're trying to tell me something important, but I can't read whatever that is." The being's hand moved toward me, palm out, not quite touching. It looked at me with those enormous dark eyes, and I felt a question in my mind. Permission. It was asking permission for something. What do you want to do?" The feeling intensified. Touch, communication, sharing. I understood somehow that it wanted to touch my head, to create a deeper connection, The idea terrified me. What if it could read my thoughts? What if it did something to my brain? But I'd come this far, and I needed to understand. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, go ahead." The alien's hand moved to my forehead, those long, cool fingers spreading across my temples. The touch was gentle, almost tentative. Then everything changed. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming. Information poured into my mind, not in words or images, but in pure understanding. I saw its home world, a place with purple skies and 3 suns, cities that grew like crystals, beings like it moving through spaces that didn't follow normal geometry. I felt its purpose. It was an explorer, a student of developing civilizations, traveling from world to observe and learn. I saw its ship caught in the storm, systems failing, desperately looking for somewhere to land before everything went dark. The crash, the pain. Then me, appearing through the rain, helping when it had expected fear or violence. But there was something else too, something it wanted me to understand. Knowledge. It carried knowledge. Important knowledge about Earth's history, about things that happened long ago, about events that humans had interpreted as miracles but were really. The connection broke. The alien pulled its hand back, breathing hard, clearly exhausted from the effort. I sat there gasping, my head spinning, trying to hold on to everything I'd just experienced. "You've been here before," I said slowly, pieces clicking together. "Not you specifically, but your people. You've been watching Earth for a long time." The alien nodded, definitely understanding me now, though I didn't know if that was because of our connection or if it had always understood. "And you have information about our history, about things we got wrong or didn't understand." My mind was racing. "That's what you were trying to show me? That's why you needed to hide, why this matters so much?" Another nod. Over the next hour, as the being slowly regained its strength, I climbed up and down the ladder bringing more supplies, better food, more water, a battery-powered lantern that gave better light than the flashlight. And we began to communicate. It wasn't words. The alien's mouth could make sounds, but nothing like human speech. Instead, we used that touch connection, but lighter, briefer. It would touch my hand, and I'd receive images, concepts, feelings. I'd speak out loud, and somehow it understood not just my words, but my intent. I learned its name, or at least the concept of it, something like Lightseeker or Starwalker. I started calling it Zane in my head, though that wasn't really right. It seemed to accept the name. Zane showed me images of its ship's systems, explaining what had failed and what might be repaired, but it was clear that leaving soon wasn't an option. The ship needed time to regenerate its power, and Zane itself needed more healing. We were talking days, maybe weeks. "I can hide you that long," I said, though I wasn't sure that was true. "But eventually someone's going to find that ship, and when they do, they're going to come looking." Zane showed me an image of the ship's stealth systems, technology that could bend light and energy around it. But those systems needed power, which was the problem. The ship was basically a dead battery right now. "What about moving it?" I suggested. "If I could get my truck, maybe we could." No, the image Zane sent was clear. The ship was too damaged to move without making things worse. It needed to stay where it was and heal itself, just like Zane's leg was healing. I rubbed my face, thinking hard. Okay, so we have a little time before they find it. What's so important about this information you're carrying? What couldn't wait that you're trying to tell me even though you're injured and stranded?" Zane's eyes seemed to focus on me with new intensity. Its hand moved to touch mine, and I braced myself for another flood of information. What I saw made my breath catch. Ancient Egypt. Vast deserts. Thousands of people in crude clothing moving in massive crowds. And there, a figure at the front, staff raised high, Moses. I was seeing Moses at the Red Sea. But I was also seeing something else. In the sky above the fleeing Israelites, nearly invisible against the clouds, I saw ships. Ships like Zane's. And from those ships, beams of light or energy reaching down to the water. The vision shifted. I saw the technology behind it. Acoustic resonators, gravitational field manipulation, energy patterns that pushed water molecules apart and held them in place. Advanced science that to primitive people would look exactly like divine intervention. "No," I whispered, pulling my hand back. "No, that can't be true." But Zane touched me again, showing me more. Not just the Red Sea, the plagues of Egypt, biological agents and atmospheric manipulation that an advanced civilization could easily produce. The burning bush, some kind of holographic communication device. The pillar of fire by night, a guidance system, a beacon. "You're saying the Exodus wasn't a miracle," I said, my voice shaking. "You're saying your people interfered, helped the Israelites escape?" The feeling I got back was more complex than yes or no, not interference, more like guidance, course correction. Your people had potential, but they needed help at certain crucial moments. The universe is vast and old, and civilizations that reach for the stars sometimes help younger ones along the way. I climbed back up the ladder and sat on the barn floor, my mind reeling. Everything I'd been raised to believe, every Sunday school lesson, every prayer, it was all based on events that might have been alien intervention, not divine miracles. But Zane wasn't done. It climbed up after me, moving better now, and touched my hand again. More images, more history. More interventions across centuries, always subtle, always designed to look natural or supernatural depending on the era. Guiding humanity, protecting us, nudging us toward our potential. "Why?" I asked. "Why help us? Why interfere at all?" The answer that came was almost emotional. Because you matter. Because every conscious species matters. Because the universe is better when it's full of different voices, different perspectives, different ways of seeing reality. Your people were special, creative, resilient, capable of great compassion and great cruelty. You needed help to survive long enough to reach your potential. I sat there in my barn as the first light of dawn started coming through the cracks in the walls. Everything had changed. Everything I thought I knew about history, about faith, about humanity's place in the universe, all of it was different now. And I was the only person on Earth who knew. Just me and this alien being who had crash-landed in my barn during a storm. The weight of that knowledge was enormous, but alongside the weight, I felt something else. Wonder, excitement, a sense that I was part of something much bigger than myself, bigger than I'd ever imagined. "Okay," I said finally, "okay, I'll help you. Not just hide you, but help you share this. Because people need to know. They need to understand." Zane touched my shoulder, the first deliberate, affectionate gesture it had made. I felt gratitude and relief flow from that touch. "But we have to be smart about this," I continued, my mind starting to work through the problem. "We can't just announce it. People aren't ready. The government would shut us down immediately. We need a plan." The journey had truly begun, not just hiding an alien, but preparing to reveal truths that would shake the foundations of human belief. I was terrified, I was exhilarated, and I was committed. Outside, the sun continued to rise on what would be the first day of my new life, a life dedicated to one of the most important missions in human history. 3 days. We had 3 peaceful days where I almost started to believe we might pull this off. I'd called in sick to work, telling my dispatcher I had the flu. During the days, I stayed close to the house, playing the role of sick truck driver in case anyone checked on me. During the nights, I'd go to the barn and spend hours with Zane, learning more about the truth behind human history. Zane's leg had healed almost completely, which was remarkable. The ship was slowly regenerating power too, its systems making quiet humming sounds at night that I hoped weren't loud enough to attract attention. The military had searched the area on day 1, but they'd focused east of my property, apparently tracking the trajectory wrong. They'd find the ship eventually, but maybe not before we figured out what to do. Then, on the 4th morning, everything fell apart. I was making coffee when I saw the dust cloud on my access road, a vehicle approaching. I looked out the window and my blood turned to ice. It was a black SUV with government plates, followed by a sheriff's cruiser. They'd found something. They knew something. This was it. I thought about running to warn Zane, but there wasn't time. The vehicles were already pulling into my driveway. I had to play this cool, Act natural. Give Zane time to stay hidden. I opened my front door before they could knock, trying to look casual in my old bathrobe and slippers. "Morning," I said, squinting against the sunlight. "Can I help you folks?" 3 people got out of the SUV, 2 men in dark suits and a woman in a military uniform with colonel's insignia. Sheriff Davis came from the cruiser, and he at least had the decency to look uncomfortable about the whole thing. "Mr. Webb," the woman said, flashing credentials too quickly for me to read. "I'm Colonel Patricia Hayes, United States Air Force. We need to ask you a few questions." "Sure," I said, keeping my voice level. "What's this about? Can we come inside?" Every instinct screamed no, but refusing would make me look suspicious. "Of course. Sorry about the mess. Haven't been feeling well." They filed into my living room and I saw them taking in every detail. The Bible on the coffee table, the photos of my parents on the wall, the general ordinariness of everything. Looking for anything unusual. "Mr. Webb," Colonel Hayes began once we were all seated. "4 nights ago, during the storm, multiple radar systems tracked an unidentified object that fell in this area. We've been conducting a search. Have you seen or heard anything unusual on your property?" I'd rehearsed this in my head a dozen times. "Just the storm itself, ma'am. Knocked out my power, broke a window. Pretty scary, actually. Why? What kind of object?" "We can't discuss details," one of the suited men said. "But we need to search your property for your safety and for national security." "You got a warrant?" I asked, trying to remember what I'd seen in movies. Sheriff Davis shifted uncomfortably. "Marcus, these folks have authority that goes beyond warrants. Just let them look around. If you've got nothing to hide, it'll be over quick." I pretended to think about it, then shrugged. "Fine. Property's not that big. Barn's out back, but it's just old tools and junk. Help yourselves." That's when I noticed the 4th person emerging from the SUV, someone in a hazmat suit carrying detection equipment. They were prepared for radiation, biological hazards, the works. This was a full-scale recovery operation. "We'll start with the barn," Colonel Hayes said, watching my face closely for any reaction. My heart was hammering, but I kept my expression neutral. "Sure thing. Let me just get dressed first. Can't let you wander around without me. Property rights and all that." "Actually, Mr. Webb, we'd prefer if you stayed here," the suited man said. It wasn't a request. I watched through my window as they approached the barn. Zane was down in the root cellar, and the trapdoor was hidden under boxes. But these people had detection equipment, thermal imaging, maybe even ground-penetrating radar. How long before they found the hidden room? And worse, I could see the hazmat person walking around the back of the barn. Any second now, they'd see the crashed ship. Colonel Hayes stood next to me at the window, watching my face. "You seem nervous, Mr. Webb." "Well, you've got armed government agents searching my property," I said. "Wouldn't you be nervous?" "Depends on what I had to hide." The radio on her belt crackled. A voice came through, professionally calm but carrying an undercurrent of excitement. "Colonel, you need to see this. Behind the barn." "You were right." My stomach dropped. Hayes gave me a long look, then spoke into her radio. "Secure the area. No one touches anything until the science team arrives." She turned to one of the suited men. "Keep Mr. Webb here. Don't let him near his phone." Then she walked out, leaving me with one guard, the sheriff, who looked more confused than anything, and the terrible knowledge that everything was over. I watched through the window as more vehicles arrived, military trucks, people in full hazmat gear, equipment I didn't recognize. They set up a perimeter around the barn. Lights, cameras. Within an hour, my quiet property looked like a scene from a science fiction movie. Sheriff Davis sat down next to me. "Marcus, what the hell is going on? What did they find out there?" "I don't know." I lied. "Maybe part of a satellite or something?" But we both knew it was more than that. You don't bring in this much firepower for a satellite fragment. The hours crawled by. I wasn't allowed to leave my living room. They brought me lunch, a sandwich and water which I barely touched. Through the window, I watched them erect a tent structure over the crash site, watched them carefully excavating around it, watched them document everything with the precision of an archaeological dig, and I waited for them to find Zane. It happened at 3:47 p.m. I know because I was staring at my wall clock, each tick feeling like an eternity. Colonel Hayes came back into my house, and her entire demeanor had changed. The professional courtesy was gone. Now she looked at me like I was something dangerous. "Mr. Webb, we found the underground chamber," she said quietly. "We found what's inside it." My mouth went dry. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me. You've been harboring it, hiding it. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you understand the security breach, the protocols you violated? On my property during a storm, they were injured, and I helped them. That's not a crime." "It is when that someone is an extraterrestrial entity," she snapped. "When it's in possession of technology that could revolutionize or devastate our entire civilization. When it could be carrying pathogens or information or capabilities we don't understand." "It's not dangerous," I said. "Its name is Zane. It's peaceful, and it was trying to help me understand." "You named it?" Hayes looked horrified. "You've been communicating with it? What did it tell you? What information did it share?" I realized my mistake too late. I'd revealed too much, gotten emotional when I should have stayed quiet. "Where is it now?" I demanded. "What did you do with Zane?" "The entity is in containment. It's being transported to a secure facility where it will be properly studied. As for you," she nodded to the suited men. "Marcus Webb, you're being detained under the National Security Act. You'll be transferred to a federal facility for debriefing. This is for your own protection and for national security. You can't just—" "We can, and we are." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "I'm going to ask you one time, Mr. Webb, what did it tell you? What information were you given about the craft, about its origin, about its purpose here?" I thought about Zane down in that root cellar, alone and probably terrified as armed soldiers found it. I thought about everything I'd learned over those 3 days, the truth about Moses, about human history, about our place in a universe full of life, information that could change everything. And I looked at Colonel Hayes's hard, suspicious face and realized that telling her would be the worst thing I could do. She'd bury it. The government would classify everything, lock it away, maybe destroy it. The truth would never come out. "It didn't tell me anything," I said. "I just gave it food and water, that's all." Hayes studied me for a long moment. "I don't believe you, but we'll find out. We have ways of extracting information, and more importantly, we have the entity itself. We'll get our answers." They took me out in handcuffs, loaded me into the back of an SUV. As we drove away from my property, I looked back and saw them loading something into a reinforced container, something tall and wrapped in metallic blankets. Zane. I'd tried to help, I'd tried to protect the truth, and I'd failed completely. Zane was in government hands now. The ship would be dismantled and hidden away. Everything we'd talked about, everything humanity needed to know, it would all disappear into classified files and secret facilities. The weight of that failure crushed down on me. This wasn't just a setback. This was total disaster. And I had no idea how to fix it. They took me to a facility somewhere in the desert. I didn't see any signs or landmarks. They'd put a hood over my head for the last hour of the drive. When they finally removed it, I was in a windowless interrogation room, all concrete walls and fluorescent lights, the kind of place designed to make you feel small and powerless. For 2 days they questioned me, different people, different approaches. Colonel Hayes was the bad cop, threatening me with charges of treason, conspiracy, violations of national security laws I'd never heard of. Others tried being friendly, understanding, assuring me that cooperation would go better for me. Some just sat and stared, using silence as a weapon. I told them the same thing every time. I found something crashed in my barn. It was hurt. I helped it. That's all. "What did it tell you about its origin?" they'd ask. "Nothing. We couldn't really communicate." "But you named it. You called it Zane." "It was just something to call it, like naming a stray dog." "What did it show you?" "We know it has communication technology." "I don't know what you're talking about." Round and round we went. I could see them getting frustrated. They knew I was lying, but they couldn't prove it. And I think part of them didn't want to push too hard, because they weren't sure what I might actually know. Better to think I was just a simple truck driver who'd done something stupid than to admit I might have information they needed. On the third day, they changed tactics. They brought in Dr. Sarah Chen, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a gentle manner. She sat across from me with just a table between us, no guards, no recording equipment visible. "Marcus," she said softly, "I'm not here to threaten you. I'm a xenobiologist. I've spent my whole career preparing for this moment, first contact with an alien species, and now it's happened, and I'm watching everyone handle it all wrong." I didn't respond, but I was listening. "They're treating the being like a threat, like an object to be studied and controlled. But you spent time with it, you helped it. What was it like? Was it intelligent? Did it seem peaceful?" I looked at her tired eyes and saw genuine curiosity there, not the calculating assessment of an interrogator, real scientific wonder. "Why should I tell you anything?" I asked. "So you can put it in your reports? Help them figure out better ways to keep Zane locked up?" "No," she said. "So maybe I can help it. So maybe I can make them understand that we're dealing with a person, not an experiment. But I need to know what you know. I need to understand what it wanted, why it came here." I wanted to trust her. God, I wanted to tell someone who might actually care, but I'd been burned too many times already. "You can't help it," I said bitterly. "Nobody can. They've got it locked up somewhere doing who knows what to it, and they're going to bury everything it tried to tell me. That's how this works, right? Keep the truth hidden, because people supposedly can't handle it." Dr. Chen leaned back, studying me. "It told you something important. It wasn't a question." I didn't answer, but my silence was answer enough. "Marcus, whatever it shared with you, don't you think people deserve to know? Don't you think humanity has a right to understand we're not alone in the universe?" "Of course I do," the words burst out of me. "I think people have a right to know that everything they believe about their history might be wrong, that the miracles they pray about might have been technology, that we've been guided and helped by beings from the stars for thousands of years. But telling you won't make that happen. It'll just end up in a classified file somewhere while everyone keeps living in ignorance." The room went very quiet. Dr. Chen's eyes had gone wide. "Oh my God," she whispered. "It showed you historical interventions. It told you they've been here before." I'd said too much, again. I seemed to keep doing that. But Dr. Chen wasn't acting like the others. She wasn't calling for guards or recording devices. She was just sitting there, processing what I'd revealed, and I could see her brilliant mind working through the implications. "Moses," she said suddenly. "That's what they were talking about in the briefings. That's what they found in the entity's ship, references to biblical events. Moses and the Red Sea." I stayed silent, but my face must have confirmed it. "They're terrified," Dr. Chen continued, speaking more to herself than to me. "That's why they're being so aggressive. If this gets out, it challenges every major religion. It rewrites history. It changes everything about how humanity sees itself." She looked at me directly, which is exactly why it needs to get out. This kind of truth, it's too big to hide, too important. People will find out eventually, and the longer we wait, the worse the backlash will be. "So what are you saying?" I asked carefully. "I'm saying," she paused, clearly wrestling with something. "I'm saying that maybe I've spent my whole career preparing not just to meet aliens, but to help humanity understand them. And maybe that means breaking some rules." Hope flared at my chest for the first time in days. "Where's Zane? Is it okay?" "They're keeping it in a medical facility here." "It's not being harmed. I made sure of that. But it's not free either. It's isolated, sedated most of the time, studied like a specimen." She looked pained. "I've been arguing that it's intelligent, that it deserves rights, but I'm just one voice against a whole system that sees it as a potential threat." "I need to see it," I said urgently. "Please, I need to know it's okay." Dr. Chen shook her head. "That's impossible. You're a detainee. You're not authorized." "But you are," I leaned forward. "You can get in there. You can talk to Zane. And if you touch it, if you let it make contact with you, it can show you what it showed me. You can see the truth for yourself." She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see the battle happening behind her eyes. Her whole career, her reputation, her freedom, all of it at risk, but also her values, her ethics, her belief in the pursuit of truth. "If I do this," she said slowly, "if I help you get access to the entity, we need a plan. We can't just free it and hope for the best. The whole facility is on lockdown. There are protocols, security measures." "Then we don't free it. Not yet." I was thinking fast now, pieces falling into place. "First, you make contact. You learn what I learned. Then you help me document it somehow. Video, audio, written testimony, whatever we can manage. We get the evidence out to people who can spread it before they shut us down." "They'll know it was me," Dr. Chen said. "I'll lose everything, probably go to prison." "Probably," I agreed, "same as me. But Dr. Chen, Sarah, this is first contact. Real first contact. And it comes with the biggest revelation in human history. Isn't that worth the risk? Isn't that what you've been preparing for your whole life?" She stood up and paced to the corner of the room, arms wrapped around herself. I watched her struggle with the decision, and I understood. I'd been there 3 days ago in my barn. The moment when you choose between safety and truth. Between following the rules and doing what's right. Finally, she turned back to me. "They monitor the interrogation rooms," she said quietly. "Everything we just said was probably recorded." My heart sank. We were finished before we started. "But," she continued, pulling something small from her pocket, a device I didn't recognize. "I've been turning off the recording equipment for the last 10 minutes. It'll look like a technical glitch. We have maybe an hour before someone notices." I stared at her. "You were already planning this, before you came in here." She smiled sadly. "I'm a scientist, Marcus. I look at evidence. And everything I've seen tells me that you're telling the truth, that the entity is peaceful, and that my government is making a terrible mistake. I took an oath once to pursue knowledge wherever it leads. It's time I remembered that." Over the next 45 minutes, Dr. Chen explained the facility layout. She told me where they were keeping Zane, a medical wing 2 floors down. She described the security rotations, the blind spots in camera coverage, the emergency protocols that could create useful distractions. "I can get you down there," she said, "but only once. After that, all hell breaks loose. You'll have maybe 10 minutes with the entity before security responds." "What can you accomplish in 10 minutes?" "Enough," I said, though I wasn't sure that was true. "Zane can transfer information fast. If I can make contact, if I can record what it shows me somehow." "I have a phone," Dr. Chen said. "They don't know I kept it. It's old, prepaid, off any networks they might monitor. You can use it to record video, then I'll get it to someone on the outside who can upload it before they catch us." "Who?" "I have a friend. A journalist who spent years investigating government cover-ups. If anyone can get this story out fast, it's him." It was a desperate plan, probably a stupid plan. We'd almost certainly get caught. But it was something, it was action instead of helpless waiting. "When?" I asked. "Tonight, 3 a.m. Guard shift change. That's our window." She stood up. "I'm going to leave now. Act normal when they come back. Don't let them know anything's changed. I'll come for you when it's time." She knocked on the door to be let out, then paused and looked back at me. "Marcus, if this works, we'll be heroes to some people and traitors to others. History might remember us as the people who revealed the truth or the people who destroyed civilization's faith. We won't know which until it's too late to back out." "I know," I said, "but Zane came to Earth carrying this knowledge. It crashed on my property instead of somewhere else. Maybe that was random chance. Or maybe, somehow, the universe knew it needed to land where someone would listen, someone who'd care more about truth than comfort." Dr. Chen nodded slowly. "My grandmother used to say that God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. Maybe she was right." She left, and I was alone again in the interrogation room. But I wasn't the same person who'd been brought here 3 days ago. That Marcus had been scared and beaten down, convinced he'd failed completely. This Marcus understood something deeper. The setback wasn't the end, it was the test. And I'd found something I hadn't known I had. The strength to keep fighting, even when everything seemed lost. In a few hours, I'd either be free with the truth spreading across the world, or I'd be in much worse trouble than I was now. Either way, I'd know I'd done everything I could. I closed my eyes and thought about my mother's Bible sitting on my coffee table at home. Lead me in your truth, Psalm chapter 25 said, even if that truth shook the foundations of everything we believed. Tonight, one way or another, the truth would come out. At 2:47 a.m., my cell door opened. Dr. Chen stood there in a white lab coat, looking calm and professional despite what we were about to do. Behind her, the hallway was empty. She'd timed it perfectly. "We have exactly 12 minutes before the next patrol," she whispered. "Follow me, stay quiet, and if anyone asks, you're being transferred for additional medical screening." I followed her through corridors that all looked the same. White walls, fluorescent lights, sealed doors with electronic locks. She moved with confidence, swiping her access card at each checkpoint. We passed one guard who barely glanced at us, already half asleep at his post. Down 2 floors via a service stairwell, along another corridor. Then she stopped at a door marked Medical Isolation, Level 4 clearance required. "This is it," she said, hand on the lock. "Once we go in, there's no turning back. Are you ready?" I nodded, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The door opened. The room beyond was dimly lit, filled with medical equipment and monitoring devices. And in the center, on what looked like a hospital bed but heavily modified, lay Zane. They'd restrained it, straps across its chest, arms, and legs. IV tubes ran into its arms, probably keeping it sedated. Electrodes covered its skin, feeding data to the machines that beeped and hummed around it. It looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile, and seeing it like this made anger burn in my chest. "Oh God," I breathed. "What have they done?" "They're studying it," Dr. Chen said, moving quickly to one of the machines. "Heart rate, brain activity, cellular composition. They've been at it for 3 days straight. I reduced the sedation levels earlier, so it should be conscious but groggy." I approached the bed. Zane's eyes were closed, but as I got closer, they opened slowly. Those huge, dark eyes that I'd come to recognize. Recognition flashed in them, then relief, then fear. "I'm here," I said softly, putting my hand on its arm. "I'm going to get you out of this." Zane's hand moved slightly under the restraints, trying to reach mine. I looked at Dr. Chen. "Can you remove these? The straps?" She hesitated. "If they find out I released the restraints, we're already past the point of no return," I said. "Please." She nodded and began unfastening the restraints. As soon as Zane's hands were free, one of them reached up and touched my face. That now familiar tingle of connection. But this time was different. The touch was urgent, almost desperate. Images flooded into my mind with painful intensity. Zane showed me what had happened since our separation. The fear of capture, the confusion of the medical examinations, the frustration of trying to communicate with people who treated it like an object instead of a person. But more than that, it showed me urgency. Time running out. The ship's power would fully regenerate in approximately 18 hours. When that happened, automated systems would initiate, broadcasting Zane's location to its people. First contact wouldn't be one stranded explorer. It would be a rescue mission, multiple ships, a diplomatic crisis, maybe even seen as an invasion if humanity responded with fear and weapons. "We need to stop that," I said, understanding. "We need to get you and your ship away from here before that happens, where everything goes wrong." But Zane showed me something else, another option. Instead of hiding, instead of running, what if we controlled the narrative? What if first contact happened on humanity's terms, with truth and understanding, before fear and secrecy made everything worse? That's what Zane had been trying to do by coming to Earth in the first place. Its mission had been to prepare humanity, to slowly release information about the universe's other inhabitants, to ease the transition. The crash had accelerated everything, but the core mission remained. "You want to reveal everything," I said, "tonight, before they can stop us." Dr. Chen was watching us, clearly seeing the silent communication happening. "What is it telling you?" I turned to her. "We need to broadcast. Not just documents or testimony. We need live video of Zane, talking to the world, showing people the truth. We need to do it now, before the government shuts it down, before more ships arrive, and this turns into a panic." "That's insane," Dr. Chen said. "We're in a secure facility. We have no way to broadcast anything." "You said you had a friend, a journalist." "Yes, but—" "Call him now. Tell him to set up a live stream on every platform he can access. Tell him the biggest story in human history is about to break, and he has exclusive access." Dr. Chen pulled out her phone, hands shaking. "If I do this, there's no cover story, no plausible deniability. They'll know exactly who helped you." "I know, and I'm sorry. But this is bigger than us. This is about giving humanity the truth before fear makes that impossible." She stared at the phone for a long moment. Then she started dialing. While she made the call, I helped Zane sit up fully. The alien was still weak, but determination showed in those dark eyes. It touched my hand again, and I felt a question. "Ready?" "No," I admitted, "but let's do it anyway." Dr. Chen finished her call. "Okay, it's done. My friend is setting up a multi-platform broadcast. He's connected to journalists at major news networks, independent media, social media influencers, everyone he can reach. Once we start streaming, it'll be everywhere in minutes." She looked at both of us. "We have maybe 5 minutes before security notices something's wrong. Make it count." She positioned her phone on a nearby equipment cart, angling it to capture both me and Zane. The screen showed we were live, already streaming to thousands of viewers. That number was climbing fast. 10,000, 50,000, climbing. "Okay," I said, looking directly at the camera. "My name is Marcus Webb. I'm a truck driver from Nevada. 4 days ago, this being crashed on my property during a storm. Its name is Zane, and it's from a civilization far more advanced than ours. I know what I'm about to tell you sounds impossible, but I swear on everything I believe in that it's true." Zane placed its hand on my shoulder, and I felt the connection strengthen. This time, it wasn't just showing me the images. It was channeling them through me, using me as a translator for anyone watching. "For thousands of years," I continued, feeling Zane's knowledge flowing through my words, "humanity has been visited by beings from other worlds, not invaders, not conquerors, guides, watchers. Civilizations that have evolved beyond violence and war, that see potential in younger species and help them along." The view count was exploding. Hundreds of thousands now. Comments were flooding in, most calling it a hoax, but people were watching. In ancient Egypt, when the Israelites were enslaved, these beings intervened. The 10 plagues weren't divine miracles. They were technology, biological agents, atmospheric manipulation, precise strikes that looked like acts of God. The pillar of fire that guided Moses, a beacon, the parting of the Red Sea, acoustic resonators and gravitational manipulation that held water in place long enough for people to cross. I showed them what Zane was showing me, the technology, the ships hiding in clouds, the carefully calculated interventions designed to look natural to primitive eyes. Moses wasn't lying, I said. Neither were the people who recorded these events. They saw what they saw. They just didn't have the framework to understand what they were looking at. Advanced technology appears magical to those who don't understand it. Arthur C. Clarke said any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. He was more right than he knew. Dr. Chen was watching the door nervously. "Marcus, we have maybe 2 more minutes." Other interventions, I continued quickly. Moments throughout history when humanity was on the brink, not always obvious. Sometimes just an idea planted in the right mind at the right time. A scientific breakthrough that came in a dream. A leader making an unexpected choice for peace. Subtle guidance from beings who have been watching over us, wanting us to survive long enough to reach our potential. The view count hit 5 million. 7 million. The video is being shared faster than anything Dr. Chen's friend had ever seen. Mainstream news networks were picking it up, trying to figure out if it was real. Social media was exploding with debates, arguments, disbelief, wonder. "I know this challenges your faith," I said, looking directly into the camera. "I was raised Christian. I believed in miracles, in divine intervention. And you know what? I still do. Because maybe God works through other species. Maybe the universe is so vast and God is so infinite that He guides all His children on all worlds to help each other. Maybe faith and science aren't opposites. Maybe they're both trying to understand the same magnificent truth." Zane squeezed my shoulder, and I felt gratitude flowing from that touch. Zane's people want to make official contact, I said, but they wanted humanity to be ready first. That's why Zane came, to start preparing us. The crash wasn't planned, but maybe it was meant to happen this way. Maybe I was meant to help. Maybe you're meant to see this right now. Alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed in the hallway. "They're coming," Dr. Chen said, backing toward the door. "Marcus, we need to run." "No," I said firmly. "We stay. We keep broadcasting until they cut us off. Every second matters." Footsteps pounded in the corridor, shouting. The door burst open, and Colonel Hayes stormed in with a team of armed guards. "Cut that feed!" she shouted. "Now!" But Dr. Chen stood in front of the phone. 18 million people are watching this right now. You cut it, and you prove everything Marcus just said is true. You'll create conspiracy theories that last forever. Hayes looked at the phone screen, at the viewer count still climbing, and I saw her realize the situation was already out of control. "This is a national security disaster." "No," I said. "This is first contact. And you can either fight it and look like the villains trying to suppress the truth, or you can work with it. Help Zane's people make official contact the right way. Be part of history instead of the obstacle history has to overcome." For a long moment, no one moved. Guards with weapons pointed at us. Dr. Chen standing her ground. Zane sitting calmly on the bed, hand still on my shoulder. And me, simple truck driver Marcus Webb, somehow at the center of the most important moment in human history. Colonel Hayes looked at the camera, at the millions watching, waiting to see what happened next. Then she slowly lowered her weapon. "Stand down," she said quietly to her team. Then, looking at me, "You just changed the world, Mr. Webb. I hope you're ready for what comes next." "Nobody's ready," I said, "but ready or not, here it comes." Zane's hand tightened on my shoulder, and through that touch I felt something that might have been hope. Or maybe faith. Or maybe just recognition that sometimes the universe puts the right people in the right place at the right time, and trust that somehow everything would work out the way it needed to. The broadcast continued, and the world watched and argued and slowly, impossibly, began to believe. 6 weeks later, I stood in my barn, the same barn where this all started, watching the morning news on my phone. But morning news didn't really capture what it had become. Every channel, every network, every platform was covering what they were calling the New Age. Capital N, capital A. The biggest shift in human consciousness since we learned the Earth wasn't the center of the universe. Outside my barn, I could hear the construction crews working. The UN had chosen my property, after asking my permission, which felt surreal, as the site for the first official interspecies embassy. My quiet 5 acres in the Nevada desert was about to become one of the most important places on Earth. I stepped out into the sunshine and saw Zane standing near where its ship had crashed. The ship was gone now, towed to a secure facility where scientists from 30 different countries were studying it together. That had been one of the first changes. The secret-keeping had stopped. Everything was being shared, studied openly, debated publicly. Zane had recovered fully, its leg completely healed. It turned when it sensed me approaching, and I felt the now familiar greeting in my mind. "Good morning, Marcus." "Morning," I said out loud, still sometimes forgetting I could just think my responses. The communication had gotten easier over the weeks. Either I was learning their method, or Zane was adapting to mine. Probably both. Dr. Sarah Chen walked over from her trailer, carrying coffee for both of us. She'd become the official liaison between humanity and Zane, appointed by a coalition of governments who finally agreed that a scientist who'd proven her integrity was better than a politician or military officer. "Big day," she said, handing me a mug. "First formal delegation arrives this afternoon. Representatives from 40 countries, religious leaders from every major faith, scientists, philosophers. Everyone wants to meet Zane officially." "How's Zane feeling about that?" I asked. Zane sent me an image, nervous anticipation mixed with hope. After weeks of answering questions through video calls and written communications, Face-to-face meetings still felt momentous. The video that night, our desperate broadcast from the detention facility, had been viewed over 2 billion times now. Every frame had been analyzed, debated, dissected. Scientists had verified the alien nature of Zane's biology through samples it had willingly provided. Linguists were studying the symbols and communication methods. Historians were re-examining ancient texts in light of what Zane had revealed. And the religious debates, those were still raging. Some churches had embraced the new information, seeing it as an expansion of God's glory rather than a contradiction. God's love is so vast, He guides all His children across all worlds. One progressive pastor had preached in a sermon that went viral. Others rejected it entirely, calling Zane a demon and me a false prophet. There was anger, confusion, fear, wonder. Every human emotion amplified to global scale. But we were talking. That was the important thing. For the first time in human history, we were having an honest conversation about our place in the universe, about the nature of faith and truth, about how to move forward together. My phone rang. It was doing that constantly now. I'd had to change my number 3 times. This time it was my old friend from the truck depot, Jimmy Rodriguez. "Marcus, man, I just wanted to check in. You doing okay? I keep seeing you on TV, and it's weird. Like, I used to grab beers with the guy who's now basically the most famous person on Earth." I laughed. "I'm the same guy, Jimmy. Still can't figure out how to fix that leaky roof." "Yeah, but now you're fixing the world's understanding of reality instead. That's a bit different than hauling lumber." He paused. "Seriously, though, how are you? This has to be overwhelming." "It is," I admitted. "Sometimes I wake up and think it was all a dream. Then I look outside and see construction crews building an interspecies embassy in my backyard, and I remember, it's all real. You did good, Marcus. Mom would be proud." That made my throat tight. My mother, who'd taken me to church every Sunday, who'd taught me to help others, who'd believed in miracles, would she have been proud? Or horrified that I'd revealed her miracles were technology? I'd never know. But I like to think she'd have understood. She'd always said the most important thing was loving your neighbor. She never specified that your neighbor had to be human. After hanging up, I walked over to where workers were pouring the foundation for the embassy building. Dale Patterson, my nearest neighbor, was watching from the property line, shaking his head. "Still can't believe this," he called over. "Used to be the quietest spot in Nevada. Now we're going to have aliens and diplomats and probably tourist buses." "Sorry about that," I said. He grinned. "Are you kidding? My property value just shot up about 1,000%. I'm retiring on this." Then his expression got more serious. "You really think more of them are coming? More aliens?" "Zane's people, yes, in about 6 months. Once we've had more time to prepare. They want to do it right, give us time to process. But eventually, yes, official diplomatic contact. And other species too, like, are there a lot of different aliens out there?" "Hundreds of civilizations, according to Zane. All at different levels of development. Some way beyond us. Some just starting to reach for the stars. We're somewhere in the middle, I guess." Dale whistled low. "That's going to take some getting used to." "For everyone?" I agreed. That afternoon, the delegation arrived, a convoy of vehicles carrying some of the most important people on Earth. I'd put on a clean shirt for the occasion, but I still felt like a truck driver playing dress-up as I greeted presidents and prime ministers and religious leaders. But Zane had insisted I be there. "You are the bridge," it had told me, "the first human to offer kindness to a stranger from the stars. That matters." The meeting took place in a large tent we'd set up. The embassy building wasn't finished yet. Zane stood at one end, graceful and alien and somehow dignified despite everything it had been through. I stood beside it, feeling like the least important person in the room but honored to be included. One by one, the delegates introduced themselves. Some were formal and cautious. Others were openly curious, even excited. A few were skeptical, though less openly hostile than they'd been weeks ago. Seeing Zane in person made skepticism harder to maintain. Then the Dalai Lama stepped forward, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile. He bowed slightly to Zane, then turned to the crowd. "For centuries, humans have asked, are we alone? Today we have our answer, but perhaps we were asking the wrong question." Perhaps the real question was never, are we alone? But rather, are we ready to be part of something larger? He looked at Zane with genuine affection. Welcome to Earth, friend. You have given us a great gift. Not just your knowledge, but the reminder that compassion crosses all boundaries, even the boundary between worlds. Zane's hand found mine, and I felt profound emotion flowing through that touch. This was what it had hoped for. Not fear or violence, but acceptance. Recognition that we were all conscious beings trying to understand the universe together. Over the following hours, we talked. Zane answered questions, some through me as translator, some through the developing technology that was helping us communicate more directly. We discussed everything. The history of alien observation of Earth, their policies about intervention, the politics of the wider galactic community we were now being introduced to. And we talked about faith. That was the question that kept coming up. If miracles were technology, did that mean God didn't exist? Zane's answer channeled through me was unexpected. Why does it have to be either or? My people have technology your ancestors would call miraculous, but we still wonder about our own origins, about meaning and purpose, about what lies beyond even our understanding. Technology explains how things work. It doesn't explain why they work, or why the universe exists at all, or why consciousness arises to observe it. Those are still mysteries. Those are still questions of faith. A Christian minister stood up. So you're saying God could have created all of us, humans and aliens, and given some of us technology to help others? I'm saying, Zane sent through me, that the universe is more magnificent and complex than any one species can fully understand. You ask if God exists. We ask if the great pattern exists. Others ask if consciousness is fundamental to reality. Maybe we're all asking the same question in different ways. Maybe faith isn't about having all the answers, but about continuing to ask the questions together. As the sun set over the Nevada desert, I stood outside the tent and watched delegates from around the world talking with Zane, taking photos, shaking hands, or whatever the equivalent was for a being with 6 fingers. History was happening right here on my property. The new age was beginning. Dr. Chen came and stood beside me. You know you're going to be in textbooks forever, right? Marcus Webb, the man who sheltered the first alien and helped humanity accept we're not alone. I just helped someone who was hurt, I said. Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't, she pointed out. Zane crashed here, on your property. You made the choice to help instead of call the authorities. You made the choice to share the truth instead of hiding it. Those choices mattered. I thought about that night in the storm, seeing Zane lying in the mud, making the split-second decision to help. Such a simple choice, such enormous consequences. You think it was random? I asked. Or do you think somehow it was meant to happen this way? Dr. Chen smiled. I'm a scientist. I don't believe in fate, but I also can't ignore the fact that of all the places Zane could have crashed, it landed in the yard of a man who was raised to help strangers, who had the courage to stand up to the government, and who had just enough faith to believe in something bigger than himself. She paused. Maybe that's not fate. Maybe that's just the universe working the way it's supposed to, putting people where they need to be. Later that night, after the delegates had left and the construction crews had gone home, I sat in my barn, which was now a protected historical site, which was hilarious, and opened my mother's Bible. It had survived everything, still sitting on my coffee table in my house that was now surrounded by security fences and diplomatic vehicles. I flipped through the pages, reading the stories I'd known since childhood. Moses parting the Red Sea, David and Goliath, the angels appearing to shepherds. All of it looked different now, but not less meaningful. If anything, understanding that these events had real explanations made them more remarkable, not less. Beings from another world had cared enough about human potential to help guide us through our most difficult moments. That was a miracle too, just a different kind. Zane appeared in the doorway, moving silently as always. May I join you? Of course. It sat beside me, those long limbs folding in ways that still looked impossible. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being present together. You're leaving soon, I said, not a question. I'd felt it in our recent communications. Going back to your people. Only for a short time, Zane assured me. To report what happened. To help prepare the formal delegation that will return. But I will come back, Marcus. You are my friend. The first friend I made on your world. And you're mine, I said. The friend who taught me that the universe is bigger and stranger and more wonderful than I ever imagined. We sat there in the barn where everything had changed, human and alien, friend and friend, while outside the stars slowly appeared in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, Zane's people were preparing for their journey to Earth. Other civilizations were watching, curious about these humans who'd finally learned they weren't alone. The storm that had brought Zane to me had been the worst in 15 years. But it had also been the beginning of everything, the end of humanity's isolation, the start of our journey into a larger universe. And it had all started here, with a simple truck driver making a simple choice to help a stranger. Sometimes that's all it takes to change the world. One act of kindness during a storm, one moment of courage when it would be easier to look away. I'd never drive trucks again. My quiet life was gone forever. But I'd gained something infinitely more valuable. The knowledge that we're part of something vast and ancient and ongoing, that we're not alone, and that kindness and truth matter on a cosmic scale. My name's Marcus Webb. I'm a truck driver from Nevada. And I sheltered an alien during a storm. What he revealed about Moses, about our entire history, shook Christianity and every other faith to its core. But out of that shaking came something stronger. Not the end of faith, but its evolution. Not the destruction of meaning, but its expansion. We're still learning what it means to be human in a universe full of other conscious minds. We're still figuring out how to balance faith and knowledge, tradition and truth. But we're doing it together now, human and alien, believer and skeptic, all of us trying to understand the magnificent mystery of existence. And that's the real miracle. Save this to remember it and share it with someone who needs to hear it.